at some point in time. I can't tell you exactly when and I can't tell you exactly who, but somebody coined the phrase, life is full of ups and downs. And if I'm honest with you, I have a little problem with that particular phrase. Not necessarily because the phrase is not true. I mean, we've heard these kind of proverbs before in our own time. We understand what he's talking about, that there are times in life where things are going to be great, and times in life where things are not going to be so great. My problem with this particular proverb is that it doesn't really convey the length of time between those ups and those downs. Because I don't know about you. I can only speak for myself here, but I know for myself, those times when I've had those ups, those times where life is awesome and every day is great and I'm excited to wake up in the morning because I don't know what the next day is going to bring me, those times don't last real long. Day, maybe two. I think the most I got was a week. That's pretty great. That was when the girls were born, though. And when I married Mandy, in case she's watching. Those are times when those are ups, yeah, but those ups don't last that long. But those times when I'm down, those times when things are rough and life is just practically terrible and I don't want to wake up in the morning because I know what the next day is going to bring me, those times are almost never ending. They stretch for weeks or months. In fact, I'm pretty sure my whole 2009 was just a terrible day. No, I'm just kidding. But that's just the way that things tend to be, is that those times that are up, they're very brief, they're very short. But those downs, man, those go on forever and ever. And that's why I have a problem with that particular proverb, because it doesn't really convey that to you. Like, again, I don't know about you, but it seems like those times where things are all going my way are very short, but those times that are not, those are very long. I'm dying for an up, some kind of a win to pull me out of just this, almost pit of despair, this slump that I seem to be going through in this time period. I'm assuming that many of you have probably experienced that yourself, that you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've had those stretches where those downs just never seem to stop. But as much as our downs go on forever, I don't think any of us in here have quite experienced it to the level that Joseph did. By the time we get to our text today, we're going to be in Genesis 41, so go ahead and turn there if you would, please. We're going to get there eventually. But by the time we get to this point in Joseph's life, he's experiencing what seems to be a never-ending down. I mean, some of the downs that I experience in my life, yeah, they're because of my own stupidity, my own naivete, my own ignorance, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of times they're done to me. They're decisions that I didn't make for myself. They're things that just happened because they just happened in my life. But for Joseph, every single down that it seems like he's experienced in his life has been thrust upon him. It wasn't his decision to be sold into slavery. That decision was made by his brothers. It wasn't his decision to be separated from his family for all this time. Again, that was a call that wasn't his. And now when we find him, he's in prison at this point, and he's in prison because of Potiphar's wife's lies. They weren't something that he did to himself. And he's been in prison for a long time. And so by the time we get to this text, Joseph has practically got to be desperate for just some kind of an up. And when we left him last week, we thought that Joseph was maybe going to get that up, or Joseph felt that he was going to get that up because he had spent some time in prison with the chief cupbearer and the baker of Pharaoh. Now, things didn't work out real well for the baker. We talked about that. But for the cupbearer, Joseph interpreted this crazy dream that he had, a dream that involved grapes and a cup and handing it off to Pharaoh. It was kind of weird, but Joseph told him that that meant in 3 days, Pharaoh's not only going to release you, but he's going to restore you to your position. He's going to bring you back as the chief cupbearer. You're going to have your entire life restored to you. And then sure enough, when that happened, all that Joseph asked him was, hey man, could you just do me a favor? Could you just mention me to Pharaoh? I'm not here because of my own choices. I'm here because of a lie. I'm not even in Egypt because of something I wanted to have happen. It was thrown upon me. So if you could just mention me to Pharaoh, I know he's going to correct this grave mistake in my life. And 3 days later, everything happened the way it was supposed to happen. The cupbearer was released. He was restored. Pharaoh handed him back the cup. Everything was great in his life. But when we left things off in Genesis 40, verse 23, we were kind of left off in a fairly big downer because it told us the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So I want you to kind of take just a moment here and just kind of put yourself in Joseph's shoes here. All right, Joseph has had this conversation with the chief cupbearer. A couple of days later, he hears that everything went the way it was supposed to, that the chief cupbearer has been released. And so Joseph is smiling, and he's probably not just smiling because his friend got out. He's probably also smiling because that means it's just a matter of time till I get out. Because he's going to find that opportunity. Again, as the chief cupbearer, it's his responsibility to bring drinks to Pharaoh. He's going to see Pharaoh every day. I don't know about you, I drink stuff every day. Multiple times a day. Especially this time of year. I'm a big guy, it's really hot outside, I sweat a lot. That's probably more information than you needed. I'm sorry, Leanne. But all this stuff goes on. He's going to see Pharaoh every single day, and Joseph just said, hey man, just mention me. That's it. That's all he's got to do. And so for the first couple of days that the cupbearer is back in there, Joseph is kind of on a bit of a cloud here for a moment, because he's just kind of thinking, you know what? Any minute now, he's going to bring me up to Pharaoh. It's going to be great. A couple days pass and nothing. That's okay. He's been in prison for a little while. It's going to take a little time for him to get readjusted and reacclimated. He's kind of got to get things back into his normal flow. It's fine. I'll wait. I've been here this long. What's a few more days? A couple more days pass and still nothing's changed for Joseph. Well, you know what? He's serving Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's a pretty busy guy. Maybe he just hasn't had a chance yet. Maybe he hasn't had an opportunity to sit down with Pharaoh and just talk about me. No big deal. I can wait. It'll be fine. He's going to come through for me. A few days pass beyond that point. And all of a sudden, the excuses that Joseph keeps making for this friend of his, they get slimmer and slimmer. I mean, his whole job is to pour drinks for Pharaoh and then watch his cup after he's done drinking. I don't think there are going to be a whole lot of huge technological advancements to make that job any different for him that he's going to have to be trained on. Why isn't he talking about Pharaoh? Or why isn't he talking to me or about me to Pharaoh? There we go. Why isn't this happening yet? And as time continues to go on, eventually Joseph has that realization. He's not going to talk about me. He's forgotten me. And I got to be honest with you, Joseph probably felt really let down. We talked about this last week, that Joseph's responsibility for this guy in prison was to be his chief attendant. That meant that it was Joseph's job to take care of him in every way, shape, and form. Not just to make sure that he gets his meals, but also to be there for him on an emotional level. I mean, this guy has been thrown in prison. He doesn't really know why. So Joseph is kind of counseling him along through this. He's been there for his friend. If you just leave out the whole dream interpretation thing, it's already kind of hurtful that this dude would forget him. And then you talk about the fact that the dream does happen when he's troubled by this dream that he doesn't understand, that he's trying so hard to get figured out. And Joseph is not only able to tell him this, but he's able to give him back hope that his life is going to be restored. And then in just 3 days, it all happens like Joseph said it was. And you're telling me this guy can't find one moment where he thinks about Joseph long enough to mention him to Pharaoh? What a jerk. In the first part of chapter 41, the first 6 words in verse 1 kind of cast a rather depressing light on Joseph's situation here. It says this, it says, at the end of 2 years. That's a long time. That means that it's been 2 years, not since Joseph's been in prison, it's been 2 years since the chief cupbearer has been released. That's 2 years where Joseph has been in prison for something that he did not do. 2 more years that he's had to experience this time in prison for something he's innocent of doing. That's 730 days. That's long enough for Joseph to have gone back and gotten an associate's degree at college and had a full-on career change, if he wanted to. 2 years is a very long time for Joseph to sit there, wondering when my friend is going to mention me to Pharaoh. 2 years is a long time for the cupbearer to never even have a single passing thought of a guy he spent a lot of time with in prison. A friend who was there for him at all times. But 2 years have passed. And the chief cupbearer has had nothing for Joseph. And so it's kind of ironic that the thing that actually jogs the cupbearer's memory, the thing that really clicks in his mind, would happen to be a dream. But it's not the chief cupbearer's dream, it's actually Pharaoh's. And I kind of want to take a second here, because if we take a step back and we look at the whole scope of Joseph's life that we've talked about so far, there's a theme developing here. And that theme is, of course, dreams, right? Over the course of the last 4 weeks, now 5, we've talked about some pretty crazy dreams that Joseph has either had himself or been encountered with by other people. Dreams that have been a part of it. And yet, the thing that you and I most closely associate Joseph with is a multicolored robe. I want you to think about that for a second, right? Because when you hear the word Joseph, I'm guessing the first thing you don't think about is dreams. It's probably maybe the third, fourth, fifth thing you think about in the life of Joseph. You think about the multicolored robe, not the dream. The dream has been the theme of his whole life, but we think about the robe that he had when he was a kid. I want to remind you, Joseph was 17 years old when his brothers ripped that robe off of him. Okay, so the thing that we associate Joseph's life with is essentially a coat that he wore for a little while in high school. Dude lived a whole life, and that's what we associate with him. That has nothing to do with anything else we're talking about today. It's just something that kind of bothered me. I wanted to get it off my chest. Thank you. But for this situation for Joseph to change, it has to involve the theme of Joseph's life, a dream. Pharaoh has a dream one night. He has a couple of dreams, actually, to be honest with you, and both these dreams have fairly similar themes to them. In the first one, I'm doing that a lot this morning. I'm sorry. Pharaoh, not Joseph, Pharaoh dreams that he sees 7 cows. That's a good dream. I like cows. And these cows, they're definitely well fed. They've been well taken care of. They're a little chunky. That's the word I'm going to use. It's not a great word. But is there anything cooler than seeing like 7 fat cows? I mean, that's kind of fun, right? My grandmother used to own a cattle farm down in southern Kentucky, and I used to just love to go over there and just walk around with the cows. You had to watch your step a lot, but I loved being around the cows. I don't know why, I just did. So for me, this dream is pretty awesome. So Pharaoh's dreaming that there's these 7 juicy, plump cows. That's a weird thing to say about cows. I'm sorry. But he's seeing them grazing along the Nile River. It's all peaceful, it's all serene, it's all very quiet. And then all of a sudden, 7 more cows come into the focus of what Pharaoh's dream is. But these cows are not quite as attractive as the other 7. These cows look very sickly. They're scrawny. You can practically see their whole skeleton through their skin. It's not exactly a pleasant sight. So this dream has already gone from fairly pleasant and quiet and serene to a little weird. But now it's about to turn downright horrific. Because in the dream, something happens that is so jarring it actually wakes Pharaoh up. We see it in verse 4. It says, the sickly, thin cows ate the healthy, well-fed cows. I'm sorry, let me go back and say that again. The sickly, thin cows ate. I have a question. Do they unhinge their jaw and swallow them whole like a snake? Or do they eat them one bite at a time? You don't know, Jan? I was really looking forward to that. But it's so weird, it actually wakes Pharaoh up. He jars awake from that. Have you ever had that dream that just gets so weird, so bizarre, so quickly that it just instantly wakes you up? I hate that. I hate that so much. But somehow Pharaoh is able to kind of just shake this whole thing off. I don't know if he gets up and gets himself a glass of water or asks the cupbearer to come bring him some water. That may be more accurate. Just something happens. Pharaoh's able to calm himself back down. Maybe he even laughs the whole thing off because it's a little absurd if you think about it. But he's able to get back to sleep. And when Pharaoh gets back to sleep, he has another dream. And in this dream, there are 7 heads of grain. And these heads of grain look really great. I'm starting to think that Pharaoh's dreams look an awful lot like some of our screensavers. Right? Like just random nature pictures. He has this dream of these heads of grain. It's all peaceful, quiet. They're kind of flapping in the wind. It's really calm and serene. And then like in the other dream, 7 more heads of grain sprout up. But these heads don't look good. They're not exactly producing a great crop. They've been scorched in the hot Egyptian sun. They look pretty terrible. They're not appealing in any way, shape, or form. And then again, those 7 heads of grain swallow up the good-looking heads of grain. And again, I have a question. How does grain have mouth? Right? Did you ever think about that? That's weird. Is anybody awake today? Cool. Am I the only one who finds this weird? Grain developed a mouth, swallowed other grain. The cows is already weird enough. The grain? So Pharaoh wakes up again, and he's had these dreams back to back, and there are similar elements of 7 different good-looking things and 7 different ugly-looking things, and the ugly-looking things eat the good-looking things. That's crazy. And because he's had this dream twice, he starts to think, you know what, there's got to be something to this. Somebody's trying to tell me something, and I don't know what it is right now. And so when we get to the start of verse 8, it says, when morning came, he was troubled. I mean, yeah. Dude just had 2 crazy dreams back to back. That kind of ruins the whole night, does it not? And so for him, he's trying to figure out what these things mean. It's bothering him all day. He's had one of those dreams that sticks with you for a long time. And so Pharaoh does the only thing that makes sense to him. He calls together all the wise men of Egypt and all the magicians. I don't usually associate wise men and magicians together. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with magicians. I like a good magician show. But they're not people I would associate with. But fine, go ahead. He brings all these guys into his temple. He tells them these crazy dreams that he's had. And he said, now guys, there's got to be something to this. So what does this mean? And so they look at him and go, I really don't know. And one guy in the crowd goes, but is this your card? Nailed it. All right. But that's a weird thing to happen. These guys are experts in this time period. They spend their whole life studying different things. Pharaoh has probably contacted these same guys, for at least most of them, for interpreting some other dreams that he's had before, and they've been able to give him some adequate, comforting answers. And yet with this one, they're completely stumped. They have no idea what Pharaoh's dream means. 730 days. 2 years. And finally, this whole situation that the cupbearer happens to be witness to simply because he's in the right place at the right time. Something finally clicks in his mind. Oh yeah, I was supposed to tell Pharaoh about my buddy. Whoops. And so the cupbearer walks up to Pharaoh and he says, hey, you remember that time when you threw me and the chief baker in prison? Great prank, by the way. I didn't get it, but still. There was this guy there, a Hebrew guy, and he was really great to me, and I've completely forgotten about him. I feel terrible about that whole thing. But we had these weird dreams, both the baker and I, and we brought them before this guy, and he was able to tell us what they meant. And sure enough, whenever he said that, those dreams happened exactly the way that he said it was going to go. The situation that he said was going to happen is exactly what happened. So maybe this guy could help you out. 2 years. And he's finally mentioning Joseph to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh has to be desperate, right? Because verse 14 tells us what happens. It says, then Pharaoh sent for Joseph. They quickly brought him in from the dungeon. He shaved, changed his clothes, and went to Pharaoh. Again, I want to pause, and I want to take a step back and just kind of look at this whole situation. Let's try our best to detach ourselves emotionally from Joseph here for a minute and just look at this as objectively as we possibly can. Pharaoh has to be desperate. He has just brought in a man who has been convicted of a crime and spent the last several years of his life in prison to stand before him. Right? The only people who know that Joseph is innocent is Joseph and Potiphar's wife, and she ain't talking, and nobody believes him. He has spent all this time in prison. In the eyes of every Egyptian, he is there for a reason. He is there because he deserves to be. This situation of a prisoner being brought before Pharaoh is the talk of the town. It has to be. No politician is going to be seen with a criminal. I'm sorry, I should rephrase that. No politician is going to be seen with a convicted criminal. This is not exactly going to win Pharaoh any political points. At this point in time, Egypt is one of the main superpowers of the world, if not the superpower of the world. So the most powerful man in the world is choosing to spend some time with a criminal. That is a man who is desperate to find out what these crazy dreams mean. So he brings Joseph in. Joseph is standing right in front of Pharaoh. The entirety of Pharaoh's court is all witnessing this whole thing, probably including the cupbearer. And I don't know about you, I just like to picture for just a minute that there's a moment where Joseph sees the cupbearer and just flashes him that look like, dude! Maybe that's just me. But Pharaoh kind of brings him in and says, hey, the reason why you're here is because this guy tells me that you can interpret dreams, and I got a doozy of one that none of these guys can tell me what it means. So maybe you can tell me. And Joseph, before Pharaoh goes any further, Joseph stops to kind of correct him in verse 16 by giving credit where credit's really due. Joseph says, I'm not able to. It's God who will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. What if we did that? What if we attributed our giftedness that comes from God actually to God? That's probably for another sermon on another day. I just want you to think about that for just a second. Joseph could just easily say, yeah, I could probably do this for you. But instead he says, no, it's going to be God. Maybe the church wouldn't struggle with a humility issue like it does now. Keep that in mind. Not for today, but for another sermon. Pharaoh lays out the whole thing. He talks about the 7 healthy cows, the 7 sick cows, the 7 heads of grain, the 7 not good-looking heads of grain, all this stuff. He kind of lays it all out before Joseph, and then he steps back. He just kind of sits back in his chair like, all right, what do you got? And Joseph takes a moment, thinks to himself, and he responds by telling Pharaoh that God has just told you what's going to happen. The fact that he told you twice means it's for real. That this is not going to change. What I'm about to tell you is exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be 7 amazing years. 7 years where the farmers are bringing in a crop that's better than anything they've ever brought in before, where there's going to be all kinds of food. It's going to be way more than anybody could ever eat, ever. But then as soon as those 7 years are done, it's going to get real bad for another 7 years. We're going to experience a famine like has never been seen before. Things are going to get rough. People are going to be desperate because this is all going to happen. In fact, the famine is going to be so devastating. In verse 31, Joseph says, the abundance in the land will not be remembered because of the famine that follows it. The famine will be very severe. It's going to be so bad, ain't nobody going to remember when everything was good. But Joseph doesn't just leave Pharaoh hanging with that. He doesn't just explain what the dream is. Joseph even goes so far, he's bold enough. Again, consider this. Joseph is still a criminal. Any minute now, Pharaoh could say, cool, go back to prison. But Joseph decides to go ahead and give Pharaoh just a little bit of advice, an idea of what to do with this new information. We see this lay out in verses 34 through 36. Joseph says, let Pharaoh do this. Let him appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the harvest of the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. Let him gather all the excess food during these good years that are coming. Under Pharaoh's authority, store the grain in the cities so that they may preserve it as food. The food will be a reserve for the land during the 7 years of famine that are going to take place in Egypt. And then the country will not be wiped out by the famine. So go ahead and use the 7 years of abundance as best you can. Save up 1/5 of it. So learn to live off of 80%, put 20% away. And that way, whenever we get those 7 years where everything is not so great, we're going to make it through. We're not going to eat quite as well, but we're still going to eat. That's still important for us. And Pharaoh kind of takes all this in for a moment. He looks at the whole situation and everything that Joseph has just told him about the dream, about this whole thing, this all makes sense. There's definitely a ringing of truth to what Joseph has said to Pharaoh here. But it leads to another question that's going to come up. Well, who's going to take care of all this? Pharaoh's got a lot on his plate. He doesn't have time to make sure that all this stuff takes place over the next 7 years. Who knows what the next 7 years are going to bring for him personally? So who's going to take over this whole situation? There are probably a whole bunch of guys in that room that are really hoping Pharaoh says, it's going to be this guy. Steve, you're going to take care of that for me. But Steve's about to miss out. Because Pharaoh actually comes up with a solution that had to be crazy to everybody there. We see his solution in verses 39 to 40. Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one as discerning and wise as you are. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey you. Only I, as king, will be greater than you. Sorry, one more time. Take another step back here. Look at this whole situation for what it really is. Joseph is a convicted criminal. And Pharaoh has just made him the second most powerful man in the nation. Again, Egypt is a superpower here. It's very likely Pharaoh was the most powerful man in the world. He just made Joseph number 2. A guy who has spent the last several years of his life in prison, in one conversation with Pharaoh, gets a promotion of a lifetime. Right? Like some of you used to work at Chrysler, or some of you still may work at Chrysler, I'm not really sure. Imagine you work on the line, right? It's your first day. You've just started. The CEO of Chrysler calls you in and says, hey, I want you to be my number 2. I don't know about you, I'm panicking a little bit there, right? I was just told I was going to screw a muffler to the thing. Now I'm going to be second in command? I am vastly underqualified. And yet this is the responsibility that Joseph is given in this particular moment. Everybody in Egypt's talking about this. What is Pharaoh thinking, having this Hebrew prisoner take charge? What could possibly be going through his mind? You know what? I'm starting to think that maybe Pharaoh ain't all there. But that's what he does. Think about it from Joseph's perspective. The last several years of his life have been hard. He has had things thrown at him that he never in a million years expected would be thrown at him. His down has been going on for quite some time. And now, because of one conversation, he's experiencing an up that nobody before, and pretty much nobody since, is ever going to experience again. For years now, he's been stuck in prison for something he did not do, hoping for an opportunity to experience freedom. And now not only is he going to experience freedom, he's going to experience it in a huge way. For those years in prison, Joseph has been struggling to keep hold of his faith. His family's been intertwined with God for generations now. But as Joseph spends day after day in this prison, an innocent man, it's kind of natural to assume that he's thought more than once, man, where's God in all this? Why is God letting this happen to me? Why is God letting me experience this? His faith has probably waned a little bit. He's been living through this down that has stretched on forever, but God never forgot him. God has chosen now to lift Joseph up. All of us go through rough times in our lives, every single one of us. It is a fact of life. It is inescapable. It is just part of living in a broken world. Some of us in this room, maybe we're going through a down right now. Maybe we've been going through it for a while. Maybe you've been dealing with it for years. And it seems like it's never going to change. That you're never going to get that wind that's going to change your fortunes, that's going to lead you to an up. And maybe because of that, maybe your faith is waning. I'm going to tell you, it's perfectly natural for us to have those questions in our lives, those times of wondering, where's God in this? Why is God allowing this to happen? Some of us, we didn't choose to live in this down that we're in. It wasn't because of anything that we did. It was just kind of forced upon us through situation or through decisions of other people. So why would God let that happen? You've been trying to serve him faithfully through that. You've been trying to make your way through it by leaning on God for that, but it just seems like it's never going to stop. Can I give you something here? Just hold on. Just a little longer. God has not forgotten you. He didn't forget Joseph. He hasn't forgotten me. I don't think he's going to forget you either. That's just not who he is. Hang on. God is going to lift you up. I don't know when. I can't tell you how. But he will. Because that's what he does. James 4:10 tells us, humble yourselves before the Lord and he will exalt you. That's a big word, exalt. That's lifting up in a major way. That's the kind of lifting up that turns everything around for us. Where one day we're having just the worst day of all time, and the next day, John and the birds are singing, everything is perfect. That's where one day you're stuck in prison, and the very next day you're made the second in command of Egypt. God will lift you up. This life can be full of downs that feel like they never end. I have felt that. But God will lift us back up just like he did for Joseph. If you find yourself in that down today, just hear me. Just hold on. I know it's hard. Just hold on. A little bit longer. It's coming.